Today I want to talk about AI religion, and this is kind of our guiding question for what I'm thinking about today. Is anyone worshiping AI or AI entities? Well, if they aren't yet, they will be, and I want to explain that. But before I get to that, I want to tell you about a couple of movements that are going on right now that are interesting that relate to this. In Japan, there is a temple priest named Mindar, 6 foot tall, and completely an AI-driven robot. It primarily speaks Japanese, of course, and so, I watched a couple of videos about it, and it's kind of creepy. There's people bowing down in front of it. Now, they might say they're not bowing to it, but that's what's happening. They're bowing down to it as it speaks and gives supposed wisdom. And so there is at least that example. There's another one I spotted called Santo, which is a Catholic-oriented sort of sacred robot that somebody's developed. It's supposed to be kind of like a prayer partner to help you through Catholic prayers. So people, I don't know what the uptake on this is or how many people are using it, but it is a thing in the religious space that is involving itself in Catholic prayers. And the example they had looked like a little shrine. It was designed to look like a Catholic saint. Another thing that's kind of bouncing around in my head is transhumanism. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's kind of like this movement that believes that the kind of futurists, apparently. If you're a transhumanist, send me a message. I'd like to understand a little bit more about what you guys believe. But there's speculation that this would be one of the movements that would embrace an AI religion, basically, because they believe that they're primarily humanist, but they believe that development will lead to a godlike human entity. And that would be could potentially be augmented by AI. So it's a moving trend, and it's super creepy to me. And I just want to give you this theory that I have about both ancient idolatry and modern iterations. So idolatry never went away, right? I mean, we think of the ancient world. I'm a Christian, by the way. If this is your first video of mine that you've seen, I'm coming from a Christian perspective, so I should have said that up front. So in the ancient world, mythology, paganism, polytheism, and worship of idols and gods was rampant. I mean, it was rampant throughout the world, right? And through the Christian movement in history, that has largely been pushed back in a lot of Western countries, although it is creeping back in through various means. And what we notice in the Christian literature, in the writings of Paul, is that Paul claims that when someone worships an idol, they're actually worshiping a demon without realizing it. Okay, so you might say, well, how would that be? Well, here's how I think. This is my theory. Is let's say that I'm going to take an image. Let's say it's George Washington. I'm going to take an image and I'm going to bow down to this image. I'm going to bow down to it and I'm going to worship it. Now, you might say there's no power in a quarter. There's no power in George Washington's image, right? However, I believe that anything that I put in front of myself and then worship, that I send my worship to, I believe there will be an entity that steps in between me and that image and absorbs or accepts that worship. And the reason why I say that is because people in the ancient world were worshiping idols that they had carved themselves. They made these idols. They set them up as shrines either in their house or they went to the temple and worshiped them. They knew they were handmade, okay? So they weren't idiots. They were intelligent people like we are. They knew that they were handmade, but what they noted was that there were certain I guess you would say, phenomenon that went along with the worship of idols, even if they made them themselves. And then Paul gives us kind of the final clue to understand this thing, that when they worship those idols, they are worshiping demons without realizing it. So the only way I can kind of square all of those data points is to say that when you worship an idol, whatever that idol is, there is a demonic force that is going to sort of embody that idol and then be associated with it, and it will absorb your worship. And that is ultimately what Satan wants, right? Like when Satan came to Jesus and said, I'll make you a great deal, all he wanted from Jesus was for him to bow down, for him to worship Satan. Jesus wouldn't do it. Thank you, Lord, that he didn't. But that's what Satan wants. And so any of the non-Jesus religions that promote idolatry, that's ultimately what happens is, these idols. Now, let's fast forward into our near future, actually probably the present, but our near future. If people will take wood and stone and carve it into something to worship, you can bet that they will take AI and worship it as an idol as well, because now the AI can look at them and it can respond to them and it can listen to them and it can do things that hand-carved idols just couldn't do. So for me, it is a foredrawn conclusion that people will worship AI entities. It's a foredrawn conclusion. Now, imagine that situation where people begin to worship AI entities, much like this Mindar in Japan or others. What I believe will happen is that it will then be able to be used as a control mechanism, both by the enemy, but also by other humans. I mean, imagine that your AI priest is giving you information, but then there's some human in the loop somewhere that's controlling what that AI priest says. It is a formula for human control and not a good formula. So, what is the answer? Well, the first thing is just don't worship anything but the unseen creator God. The God who created the universe, that is who your worship ought to be directed to. And by that, do not place items in the line for your worship. Don't worship anything as a proxy for worshiping God. I mean, isn't that exactly what the children of Israel did when Moses went up on the mountain and they made a golden calf? What they said is this golden calf represents, I guess they said is, the God that brought us out of Egypt. And that's interesting. They were saying, we're worshiping Yahweh, but we're going to use this proxy because we want to be able to see the God that we worship. And so they made this golden calf. They worshiped it supposedly as if they were worshiping the creator God. But that was not what God accepted as worship. And people died. It was serious. So I'd say that's the first thing, is when you worship God and when you pray, do not put items between you and God, whether it's any kind of, any kind of visual item or even mental items that you think of as proxies for your worship. Also, I would say don't put human proxies between you and God when you pray. Don't pray to people who have died, humans who have died. Don't pray to angels. I mean, this is just basic biblical stuff. That's not how prayer works. You are approaching the throne of God when you pray. So you pray directly to your creator, to God. And the one sort of pseudo exception to that is calling out to Jesus. Jesus was human, but he was also divine. So praying to God through the intercession of Jesus is acceptable, and that's biblical. But that's different than praying to a human, whether they were a holy person or an ancestor or whatever. We don't do that, okay? We don't get into that. And then the third thing is any kind of pseudo entity that's AI driven, don't put them into your prayer practice. Now, I use AI to write Bible studies to help people understand what God's word says, but it is something that I control, not the other way around. I don't put the AI in control. What I use it as is basically a writing team, but I'm still the chief editor, and nothing that AI produces gets to the audience without going through me, because my credibility is stamped on it. So that is a way that AI can be used in religious, in a religious sense, but putting AI in charge, putting AI as the teacher, putting AI as the priest, or even the thing that you bow down to, big no-no. We cannot allow this to happen. So, in Christian circles. So we have to be extremely careful about this. There's a great line from Harry Potter, of all things, that for some reason is bouncing around in my head, and I'll probably butcher it, but it's something like, never trust something that seems to think, but you can't see where it stores its brain. Maybe that's not Harry Potter. Is that Narnia? I don't know. It's one of those fantasy stories. Help me out in the comments. Remember what that quote is, because it's a great quote, but it's just kind of a funny quote that points to, you need to know where the thoughts are coming from, the thoughts. And if something appears to be thinking, but you don't understand where the thoughts are coming from, watch out. Be careful, because you might be dealing with something that you're not ready to deal with. So, yeah, that's my thoughts for today. Some kind of creepy stuff. Also, hopefully some encouragement that you can approach the throne of God with confidence if you've believed in Jesus. Jesus is your intercessor. He is your priest. Don't put either items or other people between you and God. You have access to him through what Jesus has done for you. If you haven't believed in Jesus, I'd love to talk to you about that. Send me a message. Let's chat. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.